Hey everybody, it's Dan, and welcome back to We War Game. This is going to be another in my line now of sprue reviews, where I've identified some kits that are really just a single sprue repeated multiple times. So in that way, by going through a single sprue together, I can give you a pretty good idea of what the box contents are going to be if you pick this up for yourself. So this is actually going to be our first Gripping Beast review together. I've had experience with a number of their kits. This is for the Gripping Beast Dark Age Welsh, which I had thought was released in like 2022 or 2023, but the copyright on the back suggests 2021. So I don't know if I'm misremembering that or if there was a delay between when it was produced and when it was released. If you do know, drop a line below and I'll pin the comment. But regardless of when it was released specifically, I can say that this is one of the most recent Dark Age kits that Gripping Beast has put out. And I do know it was also released in conjunction with their Dark Age Irish and their Dark Age Picts, which I understand, right, at least from looking at the sprues online. I think it's the same core sprue, like over on the right, and then some of the weapon, head, and shield options are a little bit different for the Irish and for the Pict sets. So I mentioned I've had experience with a number of their kits, which I add just for a little bit of context, because Gripping Beast, in my mind, at least holds a special place in my heart, because they represent, aside from Warlord Games, which I think started producing plastic kits right around the same time, in the mid-early 2000s, but they, in the form of their Viking Herdman set, represent the first company to produce multi-part plastic miniatures outside of Games Workshop. So I have experience with that kit, their Saxon Thanes, their Dark Age Warriors, some of their early Roman stuff. And I will say, by and large, Gripping Beast is on the cheaper side as far as multi-part plastic historicals are concerned. The details generally a little bit shallow, and generally the sprue contents, with some exceptions, are a little bit lighter in terms of the number of options that you can make. So I have all of those kind of preconceived notions about Gripping Beast going into this review, so we'll see how they kind of hold up. So the general format here, if you're not familiar with my reviews, is that we're going to go through the sprue contents together, and then I will put some of these figures together and we'll do some scale comparisons. I'll try to kit bash some of these with some of the other figures in my collection and give you my final thoughts on the kit. So one thing of note here that's interesting to me anyway is Gripping Beast, in addition to putting out the first non-Games Workshop kit that I ever picked up, which again is the Vikings, the Herdman that they put out, they also put out the worst multi-part plastic kit that I've ever dealt with, which was their Dark Age Warriors. And if you've not dealt with that kit, the main problem with it is just the total lack of options. Because I will say that kit came with 40 miniatures, and I think that each sprue was basically half of this size. It also included 5 bodies, if I remember right, 5 shields like this, and then basically this was the rest of the sprue you had. I think like 5 or 6 head options, and basically enough weapon options to equip each guy one time with no variation whatsoever. And I'm happy to say, given that experience, that this is definitely an improvement on that sprue. You can already see, without even going into detail, it looks like a couple more head options, but definitely more weapon options and accessory options toward the middle of the sprue. So this is definitely an improvement on that Dark Age Warrior set. So let's look at the bodies here up close. So again, these represent Dark Age Welsh, so they're going to be mostly unarmored. And it looks like an assortment of tunics, some leg wrappings, some different foot gear. Looks like some of them are bare feet, which is cool to see. Some pouches sculpted on several of the guys here, and some little knives sculpted here. And then I'll carry us through onto the back. And I'm pleased to say, at least my impression is that I think the sculpting is a little bit tighter than it was in those earlier kits. Again, this is like a 15-year span in terms of time. So I think that it's a little bit crisper, which is great. Again, no chainmail on these, which is a difficult thing to render normally at this scale. But the folds in the tunic all look good. I think the poses are convincing enough. I'm curious to see kind of how these arms, these sculpted arms, match up with some of the arms down here, because it's not immediately obvious to me what goes with what, but I'll figure that out at the build step and report back. The shields, while we're here, there's 5 shields to 5 bodies. They're all the same style, round shield, kind of a slightly irregular shape to them, which is cool. And then sculpted on the back, which is nice. We'll jump down here to heads for a second. you can see that there are 7 heads to 5 bodies, which I mentioned is an improvement on the, I think an improvement on the Dark Age Warrior set that might have also had 7, but I have it in my mind that it had only 5 or 6, which is a little bit disappointing. I think a 2-to-1 ratio is kind of what I would expect anyway out of a multi-part plastic kit, which is to say there should be at least 10 heads for 5 bodies to give you a lot of variation, because that's the main reason you would want to pick up plastics, right? In addition to price, them being generally cheaper, the reason you would get plastics over metal is the customizability. So 7 is a little bit light as far as I'm concerned, but let's take a look at the sculpting here. And once again, as with bodies, I think the sculpting is very good here. I'll dig through my bits box. I've got plenty of gripping beasts like Viking herdman heads, Saxon heads, and I'll show you what the difference is, but I think these are really, really good. Yeah, nice expressions on these, good variation in facial hair and haircuts. And again, I think the sculpting is very crisp compared to what they were doing 15 years ago. And then let's move into arms, because the arms are interesting. So we've got, superficially, it looks like there's 6 arms. You've got these 2 spear options up here. You got these 2 spear options down here, which both appear to be thrusting overhead. And I'm suspecting now that these arms match up with these here, but again, I'll report back once I've built them. And then you've got these 2 hand weapon options. This one like kind of gladius, and this one kind of tomahawk style axe. But what they've actually done here in addition to that is these 3 arms, which are down here, have what I typically call Lego hands, which you can see that they are slightly opened, which gives you the option to drop in either of these 2 axes here, 2 styles of axes, or either of these 2 spears here. And you can take that or leave that. I am not a huge fan normally of those Lego hands. They're used a lot in metal figures. It's nice, especially if you want to add in either different weapons than what are on this sprue, or metal spears, for example, maybe slightly longer spears, javelins if you wanted to put something slightly smaller in. So it's very good that they included it, at least for those options. And there are enough hands otherwise to ignore these if you don't want to deal with them, but it would mean that you would have to have 1 guy out of every 5 armed differently than the rest. So in other words, you have 4 spears with sculpted hands and 2 hand weapons. So yeah, at least 1 would have to have a regular hand weapon for every 5 miniatures that are being assembled. I don't think I mentioned at the beginning of the video that, again, there's 5 miniatures per sprue, and there's 5 sprues per box, which is kind of an unusual model count too. Typically they have, I think, 40 or 44 miniatures in their set. So these are a slightly lower price point with a slightly lower model count. So other than that, beyond the arms and the weapons, which I went over here, you've got left arms for everybody toward the middle of the sprue. They have these really great, I will say, cloak options. I'm curious to see how they sit on the bodies up there, and I'm suspecting that all 3 of them are probably specific to a certain pose, but I'll also find that out once I cut them off the sprue. But beyond that, the only like accessory, other than these 2 loose weapons, which I think are mostly designed to go into these hands, is this one scabbard. Again, for a kind of gladius style short swords. I don't know if maybe, again, if you're a historian, you know whether this is something that the Welsh fought with. Let me know. It just kind of looks like a big dagger to me. So other than that, again, my initial impressions, at least as the miniature sit on the sprue, is that the sculpting is much better. The number of options that come on the sprue is better than the Dark Age Warriors by a long shot, but worse, I would say, than their Viking herdmen or their Saxons. So sort of middle ground there, and certainly not as strong as what we see from companies like Victrix or Wargames Atlantic these days in terms of the total number of options that come on the sprue. But with all that said, let's cut these models off the sprue. I want to put them together. I want to see how they scale up with some of the other stuff in my collection, see how they kit bash, and I'll give you my final thoughts. So I'm still mid-assembly here, but I really want to give credit where credit is due, and the only way I thought I could do this is by showing you in real time, before the figures are assembled, what I just discovered, which is that we have these 3 cloak options that were on the sprue, which I had thought initially was going to be that 1 cloak is specific to one body. But what Gripping Beast has done here is they seem to have designed both 3 cloaks and 5 bodies that are all completely interchangeable with one another. And again, the only way I thought I could demonstrate that is by just kind of dry fitting them here on camera as we go along. So again, that's body 1, body 2. I'll try to make this as quick as I possibly can, but again, I wasn't sure, other than just telling you that these are all totally interchangeable. But if I was watching a video and somebody said that, I would be fairly suspicious. But you can see, I think it has to do with the fact that all the torsos are in pretty much the same position. But yeah, other than that, like, you can see some of these arms are actually in overhead poses, which you would think would, so like maybe that's the only one I've found stuff. Nah, even that, like if you kind of tilt it, yeah, I find that fascinating. So there's definitely some fits that are like stronger than others, which you'll find just from fiddling around like I am. But yeah, I just went through all 5 bodies. Yeah, I'll say confidently, I think that you can use any of these 3 cloaks on any of these 5 bodies. So that's pretty damn cool. All right, so I made up a few of these models, a couple straight out of the box, a couple kit bashes. I want to show you some scale comparisons here in just a moment. But first, let me show you the one straight out of the box. And I will say, these really did grow on me as I was putting them together. I think that another selling point for Gripping Beast over alternatives is that they're really good. Like, the poses are super conducive for unit building, because nothing's kind of crazy, right? There's no wild action poses. Everything's looking like it's designed for a shield wall, which is great for Dark Age conflicts. This one I used that Lego hand with, honestly, what is more like a fantasy looking axe to me. And I'm still not convinced. I don't think those Lego hands look good at all, but it's good to have them as options. And so this one actually is mostly out of the box. It just has a head from the Gripping Beast Herdman set, which I think makes a pretty convincing looking Norse Bondi model, if that's something that you wanted to make. Again, just showing that Gripping Beast, while they have some scale issues between metals and plastics, their plastics are all actually really consistent. So if you have a lot of existing Gripping Beast figures, you wanted to pick some of these up and you were wondering if you could kit bash between them, you absolutely can. Which does add to the contents of the sprue, right? And then this one I actually made up using War Games Atlantic peasant bits. So the head and the arms are from the War Games Atlantic peasant levy box. They just released, again, also making some kind of Dark Age or early medieval levy there. And then this one I didn't finish assembling, but I just wanted to show off again how good I think these cloaks look. Those cloaks, again, 3 cloaks for 5 bodies is, in my opinion, a real strong selling point for this kit because they look so good. Yeah, all 3 of the models I assembled that have cloaks on them, I think that they look pretty fantastic. And I don't think that should be understated. So again, from a sculpting standpoint, I think they're really, really good. I do think that they're an improvement over older Gripping Beast sets. I think that they're fully interchangeable with other Gripping Beast stuff. We'll take a look again at scale here in just a second. The only real demerit that I have is my criticism of pretty much every Gripping Beast set I've dealt with other than their Vikings, the first one they ever put out, is that there's just not enough bits. And again, especially now in 2025, with all the competition that's on the market, pretty much everybody else is doing like 2-to-1 ratios at least of everything in the set, be it heads, be it arms, etc. So to have a kit like this, like, I wanted to bring this back just to show you that I built 4 of the 5 figures, 2 of which using bits from other boxes, and 1 of them I didn't finish. And you can see there's pretty much nothing left on the sprue still, other than the shields, which again I didn't even attach to 4 of the models there. So there's really not a whole lot left to do. The other thing I realized too, I had mentioned I wasn't quite sure how this like upward arm was going to work. And what I realized is that 3 of the weapon arms are actually specific to those bodies. It's these 2 overhead kind of thrusting spears, and this one axe. So those three bodies, or excuse me, those two bodies only have 3 weapon options available to them. All the other ones are for the other 3 bodies. So just one other thing that's of note. So that's really the only problem I have with the kit, is just I wish it had more bits. I wish I had like 3 more heads. I wish I had 2 or 3 at least more weapon options, maybe a couple more accessories, things like scabbards, etc. Let's talk scale, because I've done this in a couple of different formats, and this one seems to be the best received. I've arranged a handful of models from different manufacturers here on the Lazy Susan, so I'll slowly spin them, call them out, just so you can get an idea of how these figures all scale up together. But every third figure, just so you're prepared for it, is going to be a Gripping Beast Welsh model. So let's start there in the center. So this is Gripping Beast. This is Warlord Games Dachshunds. This is his North Star Oathmark. Gripping Beast. War Games Atlantic Irish. Victrix Rus. Gripping Beast. Fireforge, their Russian infantry. Perry Miniatures Foot Knight from the War of the Roses line. Gripping Beast, that's with War Games Atlantic bits. This is Citadel, Games Workshop, their Lord of the Rings line. War Games Atlantic Peasants, that recently released box. And then we're back to Gripping Beast. So what's the final verdict here? I'm actually not sure. I think these are beautiful figures. I think this is some of the best sculpting I've ever seen from Gripping Beast Plastics. And it's just a shame that the sprues didn't have more options on them compared to like what you get from companies like Victrix or Games Atlantic. But again, the sculpting's really, really nice. It's like I like the figures more than I like the sprues they came on. I don't know if that makes any sense or if that's too philosophical or what. But as to whether or not I would recommend this set, I think it predominantly depends on, I guess, 1, what you already have in your collection, and 2, what you are considering instead. So like on the considering instead front, if this is a toss-up for you between whether you want to pick this setup or Gripping Beast's Dark Age Warriors, definitely, hands down, get this set over that other one, because even with the comparatively limited bits that come in this set, it's still way better than what you would get in the Dark Age Warriors set. So as like a replacement for that set, this set is fantastic. As to if it's a toss-up between you and War Games Atlantic's Blood Oaths Irish, I think that also depends on what you're looking for, because like the Gripping Beast set, I realize, having put them together and looked at them for a little while, has some advantages over the Blood Oaths Irish set, because the War Games Atlantic Irish set comes with a lot of bits, tons and tons of options, which is great. Even things like Irish War Dogs, right? Like, so it's really cool to have all those options. But from a sculpting standpoint, like I think the faces on the Gripping Beast ones are actually stronger sculpts. And I mentioned too that if you're looking for like ranked up unit building, the Gripping Beast options I think are stronger as well. I also think the sculpted cloaks, I'm surprised to say this, but I think the sculpted cloaks fit much better. It looks way more organic on these figures than it did on the Irish from War Games Atlantic. These, again, like I would even say these are better cloaks than what we see in the Victrix medieval conversion set. Like, these are probably some of the best plastic cloaks I think I've seen in 28mm. But yeah, the short version is these are beautiful figures. I got no problems with the models themselves. I think that if you have a strong amount of bits to lean on in terms of doing conversions like this, if you want to make some medieval archers out of them, if you want to blend in some of your existing Gripping Beast bits for conversions like this, I think that's where this set is really going to shine, is if you've got a lot of bits that you can blend in to build on what I think are some really fantastic frames here. Again, especially with these cloaks. Have a 3-to-5 ratio of cloaks to bodies with some Dark Age Warriors would look pretty cool. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this one for now. So I'll have some hobby and review content coming up here shortly. But as ever, in the meantime, I appreciate you guys dropping by for this one. And until next time, happy gaming.